So recently I made a gaming mouse tier list, which I really enjoyed making that video, and I thought it was fun to do something more entertainment based. There are so many people who watch YouTube on phones nowadays, more so almost than people who watch it on the computer or watch it on the TV. And whether you use an iPhone or an Android device to do that, there is tons of options on what type of phone to get. So I had a great idea for a video, or at least it sounds great to me. We're gonna make a tier list, just like the one I did a few days ago for gaming mice. But this one's gonna be a smartphone brand tier list. Now, we're gonna use this pre-made list. It's a decent list. It's honestly most of the brands that I'm familiar with. A couple of the lists had some brands that I wasn't. But to be fair, Tier Maker was glitching out and has been, and it is a little bit on this tier too, where some of the pictures cut off. So I can make out some of them I can't. And on the other list I was looking at, a lot of them were cutting off. And because they were cutting off, I had no idea what they were. So let's jump in. We're gonna get started with OnePlus. So what can I say about OnePlus? Well, they used to be fantastic. Now they've kind of dropped in quality a little bit. They used to be great budget phones where you got really good bang for your buck. But it seems like nowadays they're trying to play a little bit closer to the big dogs. Let's take a look at some OnePlus phones. So here we are on OnePlus, and they do have some good phones. They're fairly well reviewed, and their cameras are actually pretty good. Feature-wise, decent. Nothing is bad about OnePlus. The issue is it seems like now a lot of their phones are just getting more expensive than they used to be. They've got their OnePlus Nords, which are good budget phones, but when you look at the OnePlus 11, it's $699, $799, for more RAM. But for that pricing, I just feel like I would prefer a Google Pixel, right? I guess the Google Pixels Pro model is $999, so it does save you $200, but I think I would prefer Google's version of Android. Their stock Android is just so good, and the OnePlus phones are still relatively stock, but not 100%, and that's part of the issue. But overall, OnePlus phones aren't bad. They've got their new foldable, which is interesting. I actually kind of like it, but we're talking $1,500, and I guess for me, I feel like if I'm gonna spend money on a foldable device, personally, I think I'm gonna go with something like Samsung or Google, a brand that, at least to me, has a better reputation. Not that OnePlus is bad, but I think of OnePlus and Huawei or however you say it, but I think of brands like that as almost the great value brands of phones, and maybe they are, at least here in the States. But for me, I just feel like when we're talking about $1,499, or really that's showing with a trade-in applied, it's really $1,700. Personally, I think I'm just gonna spend the extra money and go Google. So when it comes to this tier list, we're gonna take OnePlus, and I'm gonna put them all right. They're not bad phones. I think they were better in the past, and they used to be a much better bang for your buck. But for me, they're just all right. So what's next? Well, what about Sony? I personally think Sony makes some really great phones, and I guess that kind of gives my answer away, but I'm gonna automatically put them great. Now let's go to the Sony website. What is it? The Sony Xperia? Yeah, let's just pull it up, take a look at it. But here's the thing about the Sony phones. They're small. There's not a whole lot of people that are not small in size, but Sony is such a massive brand. I don't know what it is that they've struggled with in the smartphone market. I think it's just that Apple and Samsung and Google have taken up so much space. They're so popular that it's hard for any small brand to break through. But Sony's not a small brand. But the thing about the Sony phones is this is the filmmakers, the photographers' phone. Nothing beats them. I mean, I'm sure that there's phones out there that beat them, but they basically take their Sony DSLRs, their Sony mirrorless cameras. They take their Sony DSLRs, they take their Sony mirrorless cameras, and then they just put it into the phone. That's awesome. And it gives you just as much customization options. You change your ISO, your shutter speed. I know a lot of the phones, like your iPhone is starting to do that now, but Sony's been doing it for a while. Oh my god. But Sony's been doing it for a while. But here we are, the Xperia 1V. 256 gigs, 6.5 inch display, so not the smallest, but it's not as big as some phones. 120 hertz display, 4K 120 HDR. It's got true optical zoom. I'm really just reading out the title here, but you guys get the point. Spec wise, you know, it's really not that bad. A 5000 milliamp battery and 12 gigs of memory. But I mean, really where it comes into play is the fact that Sony is one of the best camera brands out right now. Like, if you do videography, Sony's your brand. Now, I use Canon, but I wouldn't call myself a videographer. I just make videos. But I've considered getting a Sony, and their phones really are no joke. They're pretty well reviewed, and they're not bad devices by any means. Which brings us to our next person, and that is LG. Now, did not mean to put LG in the trash bin. We're gonna move them out of the trash bin, but I've got to figure out what my opinion is on LG, because they've had some really cool phones, right? Like the LG Wing is a pretty sick version. It's like their version of a foldable. Now it doesn't fold, but it is kind of a sick phone. Back in the day, LG did the fingerprint sensor on the very back of the phone. That was awesome. They were like one of the first brands to do that. As a matter of fact, my little brother swore by LG devices for a long time, but then LG went under. They don't make phones anymore. I mean, LG didn't go under, but their phone part, like, they're done. They don't do it anymore. mkbhd made a great video about them when they announced they weren't going to make phones, and he made a really good point that a lot of the features that we see as really common in phones, like LG was always the first to do them. They weren't always the best representation of said feature, but they always were one of the first people to come out with new ideas, and they were willing to try different things. The LG Wing is the perfect example of this. It's cool, it's kind of niche, but LG was willing to try it, and I really miss them being around because they did try new things. So I'm gonna put LG as great. I would put them as fantastic, but I feel like it's hard to say they're fantastic because they're not around anymore. But they were great, and they were not afraid to try different things. They were very courageous. I miss LG. And then fourth, but not the least, we've got Samsung. That's easy work. Fantastic. I lied. They're great. I don't like Samsung. I actually really don't. They make great devices. They're not bad by any means, but I hate their icons. And I know that that's stupid. That's so dumb because you can change their icons. You can change them, but their default icons to me just remind me of like if a kid made them out of Play-Doh or drew them with crayons. And I know that's such a little thing and it's stupid, but I don't like it, and I can't get behind it. And personally, I'm not the type of person to change the icons. As a matter of fact, the fact that I have a background on my phone it took a lot to get there. But I will say my very first smartphone, I believe, was a Samsung. As a matter of fact, I think it was this Samsung here. And I loved this phone. Back in the day, all I really did was text people. I wasn't a big app guy. I didn't really use the smartphone features. But it came time to upgrade my phone, and before that I had like the actual like basic, just not even a smartphone, but the regular phone that kicked out, and I loved the kick out keyboard. You know, to this day I don't do the sideways like typing. I don't think anybody does. I've gotten used to doing it vertically, but it took a lot of getting used to. And when I went to a smartphone and there was one with the kick out keyboard, it was an awesome phone. I broke a lot of them. For whatever reason, because the screen slid up, it just wasn't attached well, and it would pop off. Like, if I dropped it, it would break in half sometimes. We made a lot of insurance claims on it, but this is part of the reason Samsung is great. I know that they're good phones, but this one holds very, very happy memories for me because I loved this phone. Like, I loved this phone. The kick-out keyboard, it worked very well. It was kind of thick. I got an OtterBox for it one time, and it ruined my experience, but It was an awesome phone. I wish there was a phone nowadays that had keyboards like this. I don't know that I would get them. And maybe that's probably why there's not, because nobody would get them, but I miss it a lot. So what's next? I think we should just do Apple. Let's get it out of the way. We just did Samsung, so let's do Apple. I like Apple a lot. I'm gonna make them fantastic. Now, I know that sometimes they're a little bit behind on the features. I know that they're kind of black or white. You either love Apple or you hate them, but I'm somebody who loves them. I love the simplicity of the iPhones. It does a lot of things for you where you don't even have to think about it, and I love that. Like I said, the fact that I even have a background on my phone takes a lot. So when I look at an Android device, as much as I love Android, the ability to customize and change it to make it work for you, it doesn't really matter for me because I'm not gonna do it. Same reason with Samsung, I don't like the icons. I'm not gonna go in there and change the icons. Apple has one of the best cameras. My battery life is fantastic. And now they've got USB-C, 120Hz display, like everything I wanted an Android for, my iPhone does now. And I like iOS. It meshes really well with my Apple Watch, my AirPods, my Apple TV, my MacBook. I know that we're getting into the ecosystem part here, but the ecosystem matters. And nowadays, with everything meshing together, especially as a content creator, like being able to take a selfie basically for my thumbnails, I'll take a picture of myself just like that for a thumbnail, and then I just easily airdrop it to my Mac. I love that. And there are very few Apple devices that aren't great. Apple is very good about not releasing anything until it's perfect. They won't put a technology in their device until they know for sure it's going to be high quality 90% of the time. Here lately they made some weird decisions, but 90% of the time it works out. Because of that, I really love Apple. So first fantastic on the board, let's go. And next, let's just do Motorola. And I can speak from example because I have a Motorola. As a matter of fact, the second video I ever uploaded was a review on this Moto G stylus, and I actually still really like this phone. Motorola, I actually think is going to go on the greats, and not just for their smartphones. Now, their Moto G stylus, right? You've got the stylus, the phone, camera's not bad. I think I only paid like 250 bucks for this phone. I might have spent more, I don't remember. Could have been less. Motorola, I think, makes the best budget phones you can get on the market right now, most of the time. Like, let's pull up Best Buy's website. Let's make it easy. Look at this, like the 2023 Moto G stylus. This one's newer than the one I have. $250, normally 400 bucks, but let's look at the spec list. Because if it's anywhere as good as the model I have, then it's a pretty good bang for your buck. 256 gigs, Android 13, 6.6 inch display, 6 gigabytes of RAM. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but 6 gigs for only $250, not bad. You know, 50 megapixel camera, the iPhone just got that with the iPhone 14, I believe. So they're a little bit ahead of the game. Now, processor, of course, is going to be a little bit slower. The camera is not going to be as good. Even though it's got the megapixels, the processing power is not there to use them. But we're talking about a $250 phone that has a fantastic camera for the price. It's got a great battery. It does run relatively quick, and I'm looking for it because I know my model was, but it's got a faster than 60 Hz refresh rate. I'm 90% sure. There it is. It's a 120 Hz display. The Moto G stylus I have was a 90 Hz display. So for 250 bucks, you're getting a 120 Hz display, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, a 50 megapixel camera, stylus. Like, this is a really good deal. And most of Motorola's phones are like that. They're pretty good. Even on the $100 phones, they're slow, but between most $100 phones, like the Motorola's that I've messed with, are usually better. This gives you more features for less money, and I love that. Motorola is great. So what's next? Let's talk Nokia. Legendary, fantastic, easy decision. You don't even have to wait to find out. Dude, come on. We've all seen the memes. We know Nokia. We know who they are. Their new smartphones are bad. Not great, bad, but they're legendary for a reason. We know the Nokia bricks. We know that they're indestructible, invincible. You could throw it at a nuclear bomb and the bomb would become destroyed. Nokia is easy work. They're fantastic. Now, I don't know about you guys and what your opinion on the Google phones are, but mine is pretty high. Let's pull up Google Pixels, and I'm still yelling in the search bar because I'm excited. Google is my favorite smartphone manufacturer. Well, maybe not my favorite smartphone manufacturer. They're my favorite Android smartphone manufacturer. I love their new look. With the little visor, it just looks good. And especially the way they've updated how the camera looks on the visor. I think it looks even better with the Pixel 8s. The bang for the buck you get with their budget phones even are fantastic. And ever since their Tensor chip came out, they've been phenomenal. Stock Android means a lot to me. I like stock Android. It's the way Google envisioned Android to work, to look, and the phone being built around it, right? Google owns and created Android. So to me, when I'm looking at a Google Pixel device, I'm thinking this is the way Google intended these phones to work, look, how good they're supposed to be. It always has been. And most Pixels have always been good, right? Like we think about the Panda Pixel, right? Going back to the Panda Google Pixel. Now, there's some newer ones, but this was a legendary phone. People loved this phone. It was super well reviewed. And that's because Google just makes a good phone. And that's all I've got to say about it. Their cameras can't be beat. Their cameras are so good because they're processing, like, the way they process the image is so phenomenal. Their batteries, they kind of learn the way you use the phone and operate around that, so you get the best battery life for you. I don't know about you guys, but Google is an easy S tier. Fantastic, as this list says. But what about the rest? Well, I don't know enough about Huawei to really make an opinion. I think they're all right. They're kind of in the same level as OnePlus, and same thing for Oppo. I've heard of Oppo, and I've heard of Huawei, and I've heard of OnePlus, and I've never used them, but everything I've heard is they're pretty good budget phones. But I just, personally, if I were going to spend the money on them, I would just spend a little bit more and get the Apple, the Google, the Sony, the Samsung, right? Like, if I was going to go budget phone, I'm going to go Motorola. And if I'm going to spend the money on a phone, I'm going to get the best. That's just me. And when I look at Oppo, Huawei, when I look at OnePlus, I just think of like great value brand. And I know that that's not true. I know that they are good phones. I know that they're really popular in some of the Eastern countries, but that's just not how my brain operates. If I'm going to spend the money, I want to spend the money. So yeah, Apple, Nokia, and Google, fantastic. These are legendary brands. Samsung, honestly, should be fantastic, but for me, they're just great. Motorola, best budget phone brand you can get, in my opinion. So they're great. LG, they are innovators in the smartphone market, or at least they were. That makes them great. And honestly, I'd say that they were legendary if it weren't for the fact that they're not still around. Sony, they're kind of the small fries in the phone business, which is crazy. But if you do videography or photos, they're the way to go. These other brands, they're alright. I'm not going to call them bad or trash, because they're not. They're just not for me. And these last two, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what they are. So maybe that makes me a bad tech tuber. Anyway, guys, I had a lot of fun making this. Let me know if y'all want me to do more tier lists. What else can I do tier lists on? Gaming headsets, maybe? Monitors? Graphics cards? Who knows? And you know, I really like making these more entertainment-based videos. They're great. Don't get me wrong, I still want to talk about tech. I still want to be informative. I still want to do reviews and unboxings and all that. Let me know down below what you guys think. Guys, thank you guys very, very kindly for watching. My name is Grayson, and this has been Tech with me.